Quilt Monkey is brought to you by Aurifil Italian thread, perfectly suited for all your quilting projects.
Hi and welcome to Quilt Monkey. Over the next couple of shows we are going to be making this pillow and conquering curves. If you are a little bit unsure about curved piecing, then this is a great place to start. We're going to look at how to cut them efficiently, how to sew them, and how to tackle them with confidence. The great thing about this pillow is that there's not so many curves. It's not a pillow full of curves, they're just dotted about amongst the squares. So it's a nice, gentle easing into curved piecing. But before we make a start on that, we have to firstly consider my favourite subject, which is fabric. So for my pillow, I want to use all low volume fabrics. And low volume basically is low value. So it's fabrics that are pale and don't shout. So I've gathered together a bunch of fabrics that on my shelves I saw and thought, those are kind of quiet, those are low value, grab them all and we can start laying them out. And when you're auditioning fabrics for any project, this is a really good way to choose some fabrics, to get an idea of how they're going to work together, to just kind of lay them out. Gather all of the fabrics that you think you might like to use, lay them all out in one go, and then start taking stuff away. It's a lot easier to do it that way, to start with too many, than to start with too few and then having to find something specifically that was going to go. So we're just going to lay out a bunch of fabrics. Some of them are not as low value as others, which again, that's what we're going to sort out. Some of them, as most of our stashes are, tend to read more towards the medium value. So we have three different values of fabric. We've got the very high value, the very dark fabrics, the fabrics that we probably don't have as much of in our stashes because they're not as necessarily appealing when you first see them. We all need them, but they're not as useful on a day-to-day basis as a quilter, and your eye isn't naturally drawn to something that is very, very high in value, that will contrast greatly with the rest of your stash. Then we've got the medium value, which is pretty much probably the bulk of your stash. If you have a look through all of your fabrics, I'd say probably 70–80% of your stash is going to be, or definitely in my stash, is going to be medium value. So it's fabrics that kind of read like this one. It's not too dark, it's not too light, it's kind of somewhere in the middle. And that's what the bulk of your stash is going to be. And then we've got the low volume or the low value. Low volume is just kind of a tag that's been applied more recently to low value fabrics. I don't know whether it started out as somebody mispronouncing low value or whether it's just because they seem quiet. But it's that general quietness of fabric. So it's the very pale ones, it's your pastels, it's those neutrals that are great as basics and blenders and you can build up your stash with. So I'm going to lay these out and I want my fabrics to be as low volume as possible. So as I've got these laid out, I'm going to randomly just pick up two and I'm going to make two piles. So I've got the lighter pile and the darker pile. I'm just going to go through with all of them, picking out lighter and darker each time. Now sometimes you're going to have two that are actually both pretty light, but there's always going to be something that makes one a lot lighter or a lot darker. That one's lighter. And once you've sorted through your entire pile, you can then go for your rejects and do the same thing with those. So those two, that one's definitely lighter. Again, these two are pretty similar. I'm not sure which one reads as light with those, so pop those both to one side, grab another one and go, that one. And then you can do it again until you're pretty much at the end of the pile. So we've got 3 leftover fabrics that each of those are very, very much more medium in value. And a nice selection of lovely, low volume, pale fabrics that are going to be super quiet and soft and calming for my hectic brain. I'll lay those ones out. What I do when I go shopping for fabric to build up my stash is, instead of just going out and buying a bunch of low volume fabric at once, which you can do, a lot of shops already sell pre-curated bundles of low volume fabrics. If you just Google is your friend, Google low volume bundles, you'll get a few different shops that sell them. Westwood Acres is a great place, Pink Castle Fabrics, and also Fat Quarter Shop. So those 3 shops are great places to start looking for low volume bundles. But what I do is, whenever I'm buying other fabric, I'll just stick a fat quarter or 2 of something that's super, super pale into my basket, and then stack that with the rest of my low volume fabrics at home. And that way I get a really nice selection as time goes by. So I might get something that's a dot one week and something that's, you know, more novelty the next week. And it's a really nice way of building up something that's different, that's got variety. So I've got this nice selection now. And like I say, this works with any fabric auditions. You know, I've done it, or I do it with every quilt that I make. I lay all of my fabrics out, I go through them, I pick out some that I do like, some that I don't like. I've started for my pillow with these because I wanted a little bit of sparkle and a little bit of gold. And for my circles, I'm opting for a white solid, because the white solid is going to be highly contrasting against all of my low volume fabrics. So I'm not going to lose the circles. If you're going to make the effort to sew curves, I want to be able to see them. I don't want to sew all those curves and have a few tears and take all of that time if I'm not going to be able to see my curves and my circles. So I'm using a nice white solid. You could use whatever you wanted, but bear that in mind when you're selecting your fabrics. So now that I've got my fabrics picked, we are going to talk about cutting. Right, so I've got my pieces already cut out because I've cut my Drunkard's Path using a die cutting machine. There's a variety of these on the market that work specifically for fabric. Some of them work for fabric and paper crafts as well. Some of them just work for fabric. They are great for cutting accurately curves and weird shapes. And each of the different brands has a die that cuts the Drunkard's Path. So that's what I've cut for mine. And it makes really light work of cutting because it's so quick. You know, you can cut multiple layers at once, just roller it through. It's a little bit like an old-fashioned mangle. And there's a steel blade encased in a foam block, basically, which cuts your fabric. So it's great for accuracy and speed. But you don't have to use a die cutting machine if you don't have one. because they are, you know, kind of expensive, and if you're only going to be doing this once, then there's not really any need to go out and buy one specifically. You can buy templates that are just the same as your regular rulers, like the acrylic templates that you can use to cut with a rotary cutter. Marty Michelle does a great set of Drunkard's Path templates. They're easily available if you just Google them, have a look on eBay, Amazon, and obviously your local quilt shops. They should be able to help you out. If they don't stock them, then they maybe can get them in for you. And they are really, really great. But again, if you don't want to go out and buy specifically a template set, then you can print off for free off the internet pretty much just a set of paper templates. So you just cut them out, and they're not as accurate, but it does the trick. And when money is an issue, it's always good to get something for free. So what you need to do is press your fabric first, and then you can cut. If you're going to use the paper templates or the acrylic ones, you need to either just swipe it. You want to make sure that it's not going to slip. So if you're using an acrylic template, then they should have a little non-slip scratchy bit on the bottom, so it's not going to move when you are cutting. But if you're using paper, either swipe with just a regular glue stick like we did when we did English paper piecing to hold it in place, or you can pop some pins just down the side like so to make sure that it sits nice and flat. So one down either side, and then one across the middle. And then you can still use your ruler to cut the paper template. Just line up the sides and cut. I cut a couple of layers at once, no more than that, because if you're going to cut any more than that, it can get a little bit messy, and you want everything to be as accurate as possible. So make sure that you've lined up your ruler with the straight edges and just trim using your rotary cutter. And then you can cut the curve using scissors. I mean, if you're handy with a rotary cutter, then you can probably use your rotary cutter, but scissors works great. And there you go. And that is your quarter circle. And you do exactly the same thing with the arch. So again, you can cut a couple of layers at once. And if you're using the acrylic template, then just use your rotary cutter and cut round. Okay. So again, just pop your pins down either side. And one across the middle. And you can use your rotary cutter to cut those straight edges. What you could also do with a paper template is trace it onto some template plastic or some kind of heavyweight cardstock, just to make them last a little bit longer. And you can pick up template plastic really cheaply at any craft store. I've also heard of people using milk cartons, like the plastic milk cartons or juice cartons, and using that as template plastic. I haven't tried it, but apparently it works. Then cut the curve with your scissors. Take it nice and slowly. And once you've pieced these, you can actually trim all of your blocks down so that they're all perfectly the same size and perfectly accurate. So even if once you've finished cutting you think, some of my pieces aren't quite as precise looking as the others, then don't worry about it, because you can trim them down afterwards anyway. So what you need to do is cut a total of 12 quarter circles from your solid fabric or your single fabric for the circles. You also want to cut 12 arches from a mixture of fabrics, and then you want to cut 24 squares to the same size of the finished Drunkard's path. So once you've sewn one of these curves into an arch, the size that finishes at before it's sewn into a block. In my case, it's a 4.5 inch square. So I've cut 24 4.5 inch squares. If you're using a different size template, then just adjust the size of your squares. You can also wait until you've finished piecing all of your curved pieces and then cut your squares to an evenly matched size if you want to do that as well. So now I want you to go away, find yourself some Drunkard's Path templates, either on the internet or at your local quilt store, or by using your Drunkard's Path die that you may have with your die cutter. I want you to cut out all of your shapes, and then I want you to come back next time, have a big drink of tea or coffee, get yourself really geared up, because we're going to sew some curves. So I'll see you next time on Quilt Monkey.